My name is Nilesh Samani, and I'm Medical Director of the British Heart Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this latest live and ticking events that we run. Especially welcome to those who are joining us again. We run a series of these events this year, and I'm sure that those of you who attended previous ones have enjoyed the ones we run. And I promise you we have a treat this afternoon as well for all of you. And those who are joining us for the first time, these events are really here for the BHF to tell you about things that are happening at the BHF, and particularly showcase some of our the research that we support and fund. And this is a particularly special year when we are running the live and ticking events because it's the BHF's 60th birthday. So we've been funding research and making pioneering breakthroughs in research over 60 years. And we've chosen a number of topics, as some of you know, who we've been to previous events, to really highlight particular areas of cardiovascular research where the BHF research funding has made a big impact. So the topic for discussion today is heart transplant. And I have a couple of questions before we get into the meat of the discussion that I wanted to put to you. The first one is heart transplant is, of course, used for people who have advanced heart failure. And I just wanted to ask the audience whether you know how many people in the United Kingdom currently suffer living with heart failure. Can you give an answer to this question using the choices? Great. I knew this is really a very informed audience. So, I mean, almost 1 million people, so close to 900,000 people live with heart failure in the UK. And so there's an enormous burden of this condition. There are, of course, various treatments that we have for heart failure. This, some of you who may suffer with this know that medications we can use. In some people, we have to put in particular devices and particular types of pacemakers to help improve the quality of life with people. But really, for people with very advanced heart failure, the only real curative treatment for them would be to have a heart transplant. And that's the topic of our discussion today. So I just wanted to again put up a second question now about, these are of course not common operations, but just to say how many people do you think receive a heart transplant per year in the UK? Yeah. Oh, again, people have read up about this, Magdi, so you have an informed audience here today. 200 is the right answer. So, we can probably in the question and answer session, which will follow the presentation, we can discuss this issue of organ donation and so on, if you wish to, because of course there's a limit here related to transplantation and how many people come forward for organ donation and what's happened. But the history of heart transplant goes back almost half a decade now, half a century rather. Now, we're pioneers in heart transplant surgery. Really took on an enormous challenge. How do you not only do the surgical procedure, but make sure that the heart transplant organ survives in the new body? And there was nobody more associated with this than our guest speaker today, which is Professor Sir Magdi Yacoub, who is Professor of Cardiothoracic Surgery at the National Heart and Lung Institute, Imperial College London, and founder and director of the research at the Harefield Heart Science Centre. Sir Magdi was a BHF professor for many years, professor of cardiothoracic surgery for over 20 years, and he established the largest heart and lung transplantation program in the world, where more than 2,500 transplant operations have been performed. He is now currently president and founder of the charity Chain of Hope, and also travels to Egypt on a monthly basis to carry out research and perform surgeries on those in need. Sir Magdi's research discoveries span topics far beyond heart transplantation. He has pioneered, and some of you may know, a number of life-saving cardiac procedures, particularly for children with congenital heart disease. And I know many thousands of people around the world are alive today because of the advances made in cardiothoracic surgery. So today he'll be sharing his thinking about how heart transplant developed and some of the challenges that they faced, and of course the support that he received from the BHF in terms of advancing this field of heart transplant surgery. And then after Professor Yacoub's finished speaking, I'm delighted to say we'll be joined by one of Sir Magdi's heart transplant patients, Mary Poku. Mary is an esteemed barrister who received a new heart 36 years ago. Mary, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to hearing your powerful story as well. And as we've done in each of these events, we'll finish today's event with really what I think is the most interesting part of the occasion, which is to have questions from you and answer them. And you got Magdi and Mary to help us with this. And I invite you to submit your questions to the Q&A function in the chat box. So I hope you enjoyed this afternoon session. As I said, it's a real treat. And without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Professor Magdi Yacoub. Magdi, over to you. You're live now. Oh. You're still
delighted.
Yeah, we can hear you now. We can hear you now.
You can hear me now. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon for a variety of reasons. The most important is my very special relationship with the topic of heart transplantation, but also with the British Heart Foundation, which I have been privileged to be the first heart BHF cardiothoracic surgeon, and enjoyed that relationship for over 20 years. And we still enjoy this relationship. Now, my talk this afternoon is going to be more general in terms of telling you about both the glory and threat of heart surgery in general, but transplantation in particular. May I have the first slide, please? So my topic is the title of my topic is the glory and threat of heart surgery and science in general, and transplantation as a model. Next slide, please. And in this talk, I will talk about definitions. What is the glory and what's the threat? Transplantation, what is transplantation versus regeneration? And I'll end up by a very important topic to me personally, but in general, worldwide, and this is the global involvement. Next, please. So, definitions. Now, science is defined as the search for the truth. And again, science philosophers or philosophers of science has indicated that the truth is beautiful, but is unachievable. More about that. Furthermore, one of my heroes, so to speak, is Sir Peter Medawar, the late Sir Peter Medawar, the father of transplantation, who defined creativity as the art of creating or producing ostensibly out of nothing something of beauty, order, or significance. Significance to whom? To mankind. Next slide, please. And the notion that the truth, the real truth, is unachievable was known to the ancient Egyptians. Two things. One, the truth is beautiful. Here is the goddess of Maat, the goddess of the truth. Very, very beautiful. But it is unachievable. And the more you pursue the truth, you know that there is more to discover. And therefore, she flies away and we fly after her. Next slide, please. Now I'll talk quickly in the time allocated to me to what are the glory and what are the threats of both heart surgery and transplantation as a model. Next, please. Now, the glory is very obvious. It starts with discovery. There is nothing more pleasing, makes you give joy and in life than discovering something new which is benefit to people. The next one, which is closely linked, is healing. And the third is teaching. And most importantly, to my way of thinking, human interaction with people everywhere in the world. This is wonderful. And science and heart surgery does give you that information, that privilege. Next, please. But what is the threat? The first obvious one, if you have a powerful tool in your hand, you can do harm. And that's dreadful, of course. False discoveries, just as bad. Over recognition, people keep saying, oh, you're marvelous, you're extraordinary. If you believe that, then it's a disaster. That's a big threat. Destructive competition. Our enemy is not our colleagues. It is ignorance and pain, suffering of people. So we must join forces with our colleagues to fight our real enemy, which is pain, suffering, and ignorance. And the last one, which is just as important, is losing contact with the patient, because that is the essence of good doctoring, is to have to be in touch with the patient all the time, to the benefit of the patient, but also to the benefit of the treating doctors. So these are threats which has to be watched. Next, please. Now, I was extremely impressed by one of my colleagues, the late Dr. Aldo Castaneda, a great man whom I had a very warm relationship. He was the president of the American Association of Thoracic Surgery, and he gave a lecture about the training of a heart surgeon or a physician, and he called it an Apollonian quest. He said that he did that because Apollo was the god of intellect, the arts, and healing. It implied harmony, balance, rationality, and loyalty, as well as discipline, all required for the training of a proper physician or a heart surgeon. In this case, next slide, please. But I haven't forgotten that a very important element in all that is humility, both personally and intellectually. This is essential. Let's go to transplantation now as a model and as the title or subtitle for this evening, as instructed by the British Heart Foundation. Next slide, please. Now, you all know how important the heart is, and this has been articulated by William Harvey. You can read it for yourself. The heart is the foundation of life, etc., etc. Next slide, please. Now, how did transplantation come about? We have heard from our chairman that the history is relatively short, because only 60 years ago, heart transplantation was referred to as a fantasy for the future, something which is not real. And now, about 50 years ago now, following a clinical introduction, there was a massive enthusiastic reception. Then there was a moratorium. Then there was a steady progress, and became dubbed as one of the most success stories of the latter part of the 20th century. To my mind, it is a qualified success, and I'll tell you why. Next, please. We are really honored and privileged to have Mary Poku with us to tell us why it is a success. But we also should remember that there are limitations. The success of, obviously, that is currently, even today, it is the best method for, it's a gold standard for survival and quality of life in very severe heart failure, as we have heard from our chairman. And importantly, like you would hear from Mary, now in the Guinness Book of Records, it was 34 years, where Mary is going to tell you about 36 years of how was our own experience with heart transplantation. This is the major success, obviously, when you transform some patient from critically ill to this type of survival and quality of life. But where are the limitations? The limitations are the shortage of donor organs, and that's a big thing going on, and the fact that we are using so-called non-specific immunosuppression, which increases the incidence of cancer, infection, renal failure, etc. The dream of specific immunosuppression, which was articulated by one of my heroes I mentioned already, Sir Peter Medawar, has not been achieved. And therefore, more research, more support from the BHF is needed, more young people to get specific immune tolerance to enhance the value of transplantation. The shortage of organs needs more methods and awareness of the public. The public are extremely generous when they know that there is a big need for transplantation. Next, please. There are certain strategies for increasing the donor pool, and these are some of them. Next, please. Now, I really would like to concentrate a few minutes, seconds on my hero, the late Sir Peter Medawar, who I already quoted him about creativity and how that is defined. Now, also he said that it's the great glory, as it is the great threat of science, that everything which is in principle possible can be done if the intention to do it is sufficiently resolute. And we obviously have to be resolute to achieve that target, which is achievable. Next slide. Specific immune tolerance. Now, that takes me to regeneration. What has happened with transplantation is it has stimulated the birth, if you like, of regeneration. What is regeneration? When you have severe heart failure, that is entirely due to the fact that human beings have lost the capacity for heart cells, the so-called cardiomyocytes, to divide. And therefore, we can either rejuvenate existing myocardium or recreate new myocardium through cell therapy, stimulating myocardial cell division. And there are many strategies now happening. And also direct reprogramming of other cells to turn, like IPS, for example, to form myocytes. That is really very, very exciting indeed, and requires a lot of research, which is currently being achieved, and mainly due to support by the BHF, which is essential. Next, please. Cell therapy can include several things, and I'm not going to bore you about that. I already mentioned cell transdifferentiation and stimulating cell division. Next slide, please. the reprogramming. Now, this revolution almost of rather than gene therapy introducing new genes, actually you can reprogram cells is fantastic and has having a lot of influence on heart failure in future and so on. Next slide, please. And this is the idea of reprogramming the so-called CRISPR-Cas9. Two ladies won the Nobel Prize not very long ago for their role in discovering the this gene editing by CRISPR-Cas. Next slide, please. So, in the summary, the journey of transplantation and generation and beyond continues at an ever accelerating rate and requires more research, more young minds, more support from the British Foundation, which relies on the public. Now, what do I do? Next slide, please. I nearly finished. I will finish by a very important topic close to my heart and should be to everybody, and this is global involvement. Next, please. Because taking cardiac surgery and transplantation to the people worldwide is essential. And the facts are that the access to sophisticated surgery in general and transplantation is very, very patchy around the world. Next slide, please. And efforts to do that is essential. And the size of the problem is huge. Who cares? We do all care. Who acts? Who pays, etc. These are questions which are being answered as we speak. Next slide, please. Although it has been said many times, all patients are the same, and there are many examples in the literature, but the facts are not the same. 80% of the population of the world do not have access to current knowledge and technology, and that has to be addressed. Next, please. One attempt is our group, the Chain of Hope charity, is present in several countries in Africa, as well as Central America, and they try their best. Next, please. And importantly, like the one in Aswan, where there was nothing, beautiful place, historic, 4,000 years, etc., but there was nothing 10 years ago. Next slide, please. And now there is a very sophisticated unit which takes sophisticated cardiac surgery to everybody without any charge, very similar to the National Health Service, which I am a great believer of. And this is the neonatal unit there, performing over 1,000 operations a year, over 3,000 the procedures, percutaneous and so on. Next slide, Steve. And this is the staff. The local staff, very enthusiastic, supply all their services to the public without charging a penny. And it prefers the poor and the desolate. Next slide, please, at the highest level. And research is a huge element. And now the same model is being replicated in Rwanda, where again, there is nothing for service to the community. Next slide, please. So I have to conclude now by saying that science and medicine offer unprecedented opportunities for discovery and alleviating human suffering. Transplantation is a very important example, but that research is fundamental for progress, and that British Heart Foundation plays a crucial role, and that while we are applying all that, we should watch for the threats I have mentioned earlier. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Magdi, thank you very much for your fantastic presentation, which I think will cause you people a lot of things to think about. You know, particularly the work you've done recently, of course, on making or democratizing access to such specialist need in developing countries. So I'm sure people will applaud the work you've done with the Chain of Hope charity and your work. Even, you know, you still remain as busy as you always were with these sort of activities. So congratulations to you on what you're achieving beyond your research, the excellence that you've done for many years. We'll have questions at the end. You know, once our second speaker is speaking. So it's again a delight and a pleasure to introduce Mary Poku to you. As I mentioned, Mary received a heart transplant from Magdi, so there's a really quite fantastic connection between our first and second speakers today. 36 years ago, Mary is now a renowned barrister. And Mary, I'm sure the audience will be very pleased to hear from you about your journey.
Thank you very much, Professor Nilesh Samani. It is a great honor to be here, and I'm so grateful to Sir Magdi for calling me and telling me about this, and I was more than happy to accept the invitation to talk about my transplant journey. And a big thank you to the British Heart Foundation family for also having me here. My transplant journey actually began at the end of my treatment for chemotherapy. I had cancer when I was 13 in 1983. The treatment lasted over a year, and I was supposed to be recovering. I was, rather than recovering, I was getting more and more ill. I couldn't walk, so I used to have to use a wheelchair. And it was when I spoke to my then oncologist, he came to see me, and at the time, I had actually seen a TB program about transplantation in Harefield Hospital. And despite the fact that at the time I was only 14 years old in '84, I did actually say to him, look, you told me to grit my teeth to have chemotherapy, but I really sincerely hope that, you know, what I've been seeing on TV about what's happened to my heart, because they kept saying that there was something wrong with my heart. And because they had done an X-ray and they had seen that the heart had become enlarged. And so essentially he said, oh, don't worry. But within a couple of weeks, I was basically sent for an assessment. And I was put through various tests. But in short, my heart was beating very rapidly, and I was short of breath all the time. And as I said, I had to use a wheelchair. I was not mobile, and all my muscles were degenerating, basically. Fast forward to National Heart Hospital, and I remember the first time I met Sir Magdi Yacoub, I actually burst into tears because I had got to such a point in my life where I was just very fed up, because as a teenager, I just wanted to get back to school, but I was just getting weaker and weaker. And in short, I was then told that I had cardiomyopathy. And essentially there was no way. The only choice I had was essentially to be put on the transplant waiting list, and I had 3 months to live. And so I ended up on the transplant waiting list. But actually, I learned a lot from a lot of young children who were at the National Heart Hospital, because rather than bursting into tears at every opportunity, I learned from a lot of brave young kids who were also on the children's ward. So in short, I waited on the list, and early, I think in '85, I was at home about to have dinner when I saw my mother take a call. And she told my father it's the hospital. And I suddenly put the spoon down, and because I've been told, something told me that that was the call, because in those days you were given very little notice. And so I did not eat. I knew I couldn't eat before surgery, and I just knew. And in short, it was the call. And within the hour, an ambulance came to collect my mother and I, and we were rushed to Harefield Hospital. And essentially, I was prepared for the surgery. And I was quite a brave young teenager, because you just become tough when you've been ill for such a long time as a teenager. But I remember the moment when I was quite frightened, was that I was in a cubicle where infection was a very, very high risk. And so I had to be separated from my mother. She was put into sort of an apron and protective kit. And I was in a cubicle because everything had to be sanitized because of a risk of infection after the surgery. And that was when, just for a moment, I was quite frightened. But at the same time, I was grateful, very grateful to the donor, for just having the opportunity. I knew that I had been given a very life-saving opportunity. In short, I woke up. It was a couple of days later, and I spat out the breathing machine. I was full of life, and I was in a lot of pain, but I was just exhilarated that I had made it, because I was alive and feeling the pain, so I knew I was alive and I had made it. And the extent of the pain was such that I even had to have an injection for the bed to be made in those days, because it was so painful. But I learned to walk again, and within a matter of 10 days, I was out of the hospital. And so fast forward now, I've managed to go back to school, qualify, and become a barrister. And at the time, originally, my parents, coming from Ghana originally, were not in favor of me having the surgery at all, because in 85, only 200 people had had the surgery ever in the UK. And in fact, Sir Magdi Yacoub, I'm so grateful to him, convinced my parents and said, look, I appreciate that not many people have had this operation, but first of all, you need to tell her, because my parents didn't want to tell me that this was what was going to happen once they decided that I could have it. But also he persuaded them and gave them the courage to allow me to have that surgery. And so I'm so grateful. And just to illustrate, after the surgery, I was taking 14 different medications and different medications. And today, I'm only on 2 different immunosuppressant tablets and occasional aspirin. And so I'm just very thankful to all the sponsors, the donor, British Heart Foundation, and Sir Magdi Yacoub for essentially saving my life. So thank you. And I'm very pleased to be here.
What a great story. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Mary. I'm sure there'll be some questions that will arise as a consequence. So really, you can really so well, really, the different dilemmas that family go through when a heart transplant comes up, and particularly in those early days when it wasn't a well-established procedure and there were pioneers like Magdi doing them. And of course, it's a challenge, and there are so many patients who contributed to our learning of how to make this procedure safer, and you've been one of them. So it's such a great privilege to have you here today. So Magdi, there are some pre-submitted questions, and I'm sure there will be others that people want to pick up. So I'm going to pass now to Christie Norris, who is going to sort of put the questions to the appropriate person amongst all of us. So over to you, Christie, for the question session.
Thank you, Nilesh, and just thanks again to Mary and Sir Magdi for joining. It's been a fantastic session already. So we've had lots of questions submitted. My first question is for you, Magdi, and it's an interesting one. Can a 60-year-old's heart be transplanted into a younger person?
The answer is yes. It all depends.
Magdi, you seem to have gone back on mute. So do you want to just unmute yourself again? I think it automatically went on mute. I think you're now showing one of your pictures to us, but I think okay, there you are.
Unmute. Yeah.
Perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Sorry about that.
No.
The answer to the question is it possible to transplant a heart from a 60-year-old? The answer is yes, depending on how healthy that heart is. And that really shows that if you look after your heart, and the British Heart Foundation is very conscious of that, that the population should look after their heart, and you can have a heart at 60 or 70, which is very healthy and can be transplanted into a young person if need be, when the need comes. Have I answered your question?
You have, thank you. A great answer. So we have another question for you, Magdi, which was submitted beforehand, which is, what are you most proud of in your surgical career? I'm sure there are many moments for you to choose from, but can you select one for us today?
I find that difficult sometimes because it is like asking me, who is your favorite child or son or daughter or grandchild? I love them all. And I'm proud of the profession itself. I consider myself extremely lucky to have been associated with cardiac surgery, which gives me the opportunity to treat people, but also to discover new things which benefit people. So I am the lucky one, and I love them all.
Lovely answer. Great. So we have another question for you, Magdi. And you touched on this a little bit in your presentation, but if you could expand, what do you envisage for the future of heart transplantation? What would you like to see become a reality?
I think there is a whole lot of work to be done to improve the results of heart transplantation. The first, as I mentioned, is to make it available to more people, because it's a sad thing, even in developed country like the UK or the West or whatever, we're still using less than 10 or 20% of the hearts being offered, and a much smaller proportion of the potential hearts which can be used. So there is a whole lot of things I would love to see efforts to use all the available hearts to increase the awareness of the population. There are people dying, children, adults in the prime of their life, people like Mary, who can benefit tremendously from such a donation. It's literally a donation of life. And what more can you give? I don't think there is. So that is one. The second is inducing specific immune tolerance, making sure that we have, like Sir Peter Medawar showed in his first experiment, which won him the Nobel Prize, that you can induce tolerance to only the organ transplanted and not suppress the immune system in general and produce more infection and cancer and this and that and the other. So specific immune tolerance is another. And the final one is actually tissue engineering. Like I said, transplantation has stimulated regeneration and tissue engineering. We have some work at Harefield and Imperial College and in Aswan on engineering heart valves, engineering heart muscle, parts of the heart, vessels. And so mixing biology to me is supreme. But if you can emulate biology by artificial organs and have that interaction in a positive way, that is also a massive dream which could benefit, like we have heard from Nilesh, that there are thousands of people with heart failure or valve disease who can benefit from all that.
Christie, can I add to what Magdi's just said? I mean, it's a terrific answer. Magdi, I think, as you said, the hope here is not only we need to increase the number of transplants, you're right, and make them, make the immunosuppression more targeted for people so they have a better quality of life and don't have the side effects. So that those need further research and further advances and policy making as well in many countries. As you know, the BHF has supported a huge amount of effort by the national, by government setting things around organ donation and making them more accessible and so on. As you know, there have been changes in the law recently to allow people for organ donation to take place more freely. You mentioned cardiac regeneration or research on tissue repair and healing, which we also support, and we might come back to that later. There's also a question, and we've heard recently, of course, that there are also efforts going on to try and make totally artificial hearts, and so to replace the heart we have with hearts that are made of soft robotics or other technologies. So there are, I think, just to give a sort of spectrum to the audience, that there is considerable work going on. I mean, it's a big problem for us, the heart failure as a community. It's likely to be an increasing problem with time because of the aging population, and therefore multiple efforts in different directions, all from increasing the number of transplants, because that was a sort of frontier, new types of medication for people with heart failure, cardiac regeneration, and indeed the prospects of a totally artificial heart are all in play. They all require more research to be done to see if they will be successful. So enormous amount of effort going on in this area.
Thank you, Nilesh. So we have a really fascinating question from the public. Thank you for all of your questions, who's with us today. And this is from Magdi. So we know our heartbeats are as unique as our fingerprints. If you have a heart transplant, does that mean that your heartbeat pattern changes?
No, I think while there is interaction between the heart and many other organs, each one of them has its specific structure, which does not change. The function can improve, or there is interaction, but the structure remains the same.
Great, thank you. And we have another question for you, Magdi, which is personal to you. So if you'd be willing to share, what difficulties do you face personally being a transplant surgeon today?
Many difficulties, mainly the ethical. People for a long time considered transplantation as unethical. That upset me a lot and made me think a lot. Taking liberty with the community, I thought we are not. We are asking permission for an organ which is going to be thrown and or burnt to be used for somebody else. And then people said, oh, you're forcing them, the so-called presumed consent, that you're forcing them to do things they do not want. I'm not. I'm just asking them very cordially to think again. Do they want to help a fellow country person or person in humanity anywhere, or through the organs? And that is what helped me. This was quite a challenge. Obviously, the sleepless nights and the trying harder and harder to improve results has always been another problem. But the ethical ones, which were the tough one.
I can imagine. And we have a really interesting question that's been submitted, which is also for you, Magdi. Does a heart transplant lead to the recipient taking on some of the personality traits or characteristics of the donor?
That has been said many times. And initially, I thought that the heart was just a pump. Now it turns out, no, it's not. It does secrete hormones. It does communicate with the brain, with nerves. So it can influence the brain and secrete its own hormone. But to go to the extreme that it says it changes personality, I don't believe that. I believe there is a strong interaction between the heart, which is not just a pump. It's a very, very sophisticated organ, unbelievably sophisticated, and it communicates with almost every other organ in the body, but it does not change personality, to my way of thinking.
I'm not sure any very specific research has been done on that. It's an interesting, very interesting question. Yeah, I agree with you, Magdi, it doesn't change personality. Mary, did you feel your parents felt your personality changed?
No, I'm afraid I'm just as stubborn as I always have been, apparently. So.
Good. There's your answer. There's your answer, Christie. Personality doesn't change as a consequence.
Fantastic. And we have another excellent question. There's such great questions we've had submitted. Magdi, can you retransplant the same heart more than once?
Unfortunately not, because when you need to retransplant the heart, usually there is transplant atherosclerosis, there is severe rejection, there is something wrong with the heart rather than with the recipient. So this hardly ever, if it never, in my experience, barrister.
Great, thank you. And we have a question for Mary, which we would love to ask you, Mary. Do you think your heart transplant has impacted how you live your life today?
Absolutely, yes. I think when I was a lot younger, not really, because it's only much later on that I adopted a policy where I took the view that if I look after myself, I look after the heart. That's a way of, essentially a way to thank the donor, really, to look after the heart. And then the healthier I am, the less immunosuppressants I have to take. And so it's like a sort of bargain that I've made with myself and with essentially if I find that I take very little immune suppressants now because I live a very healthy lifestyle. I try to exercise daily and I try to watch what I eat. It's a small sacrifice to prolong the longevity of the heart. So yes, I do. It does make a difference, definitely.
And do you think it's driven you in terms of your decisions around your career or the routes that you've taken in life? Do you feel that that's been a driver?
Definitely. I always wanted to follow a profession that was a vocational profession. And I find that through my profession, I can give other young people a voice. And so it's a bit like Sir Magdi Yacoub gave me a voice when I was younger and essentially encouraged and persuaded my parents that, first of all, to tell me what I was going to have to go through, because it gave me the strength to survive the surgery. In the same way, listening to young people is a big thing in my life now. And through my profession, I can do that. So it definitely had an impact to see professional people in the medical arena listen to young people in the same way. I adopt the same policy with my career. So the answer is yes.
Thank you, Mary. And I have one more question for you, if you're willing to answer. So it's a thank you for sharing your powerful story. What piece of advice would you give to patients who are about to receive a heart transplant? So I guess passing on something from your own experience.
I think the advice I would give is literally to remain calm, to ask questions, not to be too afraid to ask, even if the questions appear silly to you. I think we've got great professional people in all the hospitals. All the experts are not. Sometimes we're completely in awe and we're too scared to ask questions. And so all I would say is any thoughts, even no matter how silly they seem, always worth articulating it to your doctors, your consultants. Just be open. And you will always be listened to, because that's what saved me. It is talking about a TV program about an operation that I'd seen on TV helped me. and also expressing my fears. And so communicate is what I would say.
Thank you, Mary. And Magdi, we have had a question asked live today, so thank you for this question. He says, congratulations for the work of Chain of Hope. I am curious as to how you have approached developing new innovations in heart surgery, given the potential risks that come with innovation. How do you deal with the pressure in these situations?
Now, there are two questions here. One is the Chain of Hope and global medicine. The other is innovation. Did I understand that the question is more innovation?
Yes, more exactly, yes.
I think I've always struggled a little because when you are trying to innovate, you think that there is a possibility that this idea will succeed and will benefit people. But actually the application is quite difficult because two things. One, once you're out there in the dark, an area which has not been explored ever again, you're on your own and anything can happen, and you struggle a little. I'll try and work it out in great details. I can't sleep at night thinking about it and so on. And after ironing everything out as much as I can, you apply it in vivo, in vitro, in the lab and whatever, but you still have to cross that barrier and try it in humans. And the worry there is that you subject human beings to a certain calculated risk, but you know for sure that there is no other option, but you make sure that I once talked that wrote a thing about innovation at what price and who pays the price. Is it the patient? That's totally unacceptable. So you have to try very hard to have innovation at an acceptable price, and the balance between benefit and risk to the patient is acceptable to him or her. So there are difficulties in innovation and applying it. But once it works, it's a great delight because thousands or others like the arterial switch operation, valve conserving operations, new operations for truncus arteriosus, people, babies born with one vessel, all these things are, there is worth investing in innovation, trying to help these people. Have I answered your question?
You have, thank you. And we have another question for you, Magdi, which is, can you remember the first heart transplant that you performed?
Yes, indeed. That I remember very vividly, that the first one was performed at Harefield, and actually we were not prepared, and that it did not succeed, and that taught me the lesson that we really have to not just do it as a one-off, but as a program and as a team. You can't go on preparing forever because that's just impossible. But you need to work through a program and a team and do it consistently. And the first one was not successful. And after that, it became more and more of a routine. We used to do sometimes 7 or 8 transplants during the weekend from Friday to Monday. And Chris Barnard, when he came, he said, how do you achieve that? Teamwork. We knew each one of us who is going to do what, and who will go have some rest, and who will go and harvest, and who will do X and Y. It's a team effort. So I do remember going through all, the first one for sure, but establishing a team effort and making it, at least the operation itself, a routine and not an exciting thing. And then, as Dr. Samani said, it is for Sir Nilesh, I should say, how to make the patient survive. That is a big challenge. And we developed with others, of course, the transvenous biopsy, taking small bits of the heart, analyzing it late at night to make sure how much immunosuppression should be given or not given. All that is very important.
I'm sure you'll never forget your first heart transplant. That'll be with you forever. Nilesh, we have a question for you, then I'd like to invite you to close. So the question is, what regenerative medicine or heart healing research is currently being funded by the BHF?
Thank you for that question. I mean, an enormous amount, really. I mean, it's a key area for us, as you say, because heart failure is such an important topic, and there have been many developments that we promise to the things that Magdi was talking about earlier about regenerating the heart using different approaches or coaxing the remaining cells of the heart to proliferate and so on. And so the way we've done this, and some of the audience might remember it, that a few years ago we had a specific appeal to raise funds called Mending Broken Hearts. So some of them will remember there was a very famous photograph of zebrafish, which is a model that's often used. And so a lot of our funding is based on these centers of regenerative medicine. We set up 3 centers in the United Kingdom. Each center consists of several university partners within it, looking at different aspects of how we can improve and heal the heart in the way that's described. And so some of them are working on mechanisms to do this by coaxing what's in the heart itself, or the remaining heart. Others are looking at stem cells, as we've discussed, and putting new cells into the body. And others are looking at repairing and think about the blood vessels you need. So if you just form new heart tissue, the heart tissue still needs new blood vessels and so on. So it's a sort of combination of those 3 approaches that likely to yield to their success. And it's been tremendously successful in the last few years that the regenerative medicine centers have made enormous progress and advances in our understanding of the biology of how the heart can heal and repair itself. So thanks again to the generosity of our funders, we've been able to support a significant amount, I mean, world-leading amount of research into regenerative medicine. Do you want me to close now, Christie? Is that the plan? Yeah, I think we're
yes.
out of time.
Thank you, Nilesh. Perfect.
So look, what can I say, Magdi and Mary? You know, it's a wonderful journey. I really brought to life your journey, both individual journeys through the transplant thing. I think particularly through the questions and the way you address the questions, I think it's really brought to life what both of you have been through in terms of your experience in first developing the approach to transplantation and the initial risks you took and the extreme care you took, Magdi, in terms of making sure the patients were part of their journey. And Mary, your particular topic in your story of how you lived through the experience. So thank you so much. And I can see in the chat bar, many people really appreciate what you've done. I hope people have enjoyed this. It's been a really special session. As I say at the beginning of the conversation, this is our 60th year, and you know, the transplant story is one of those impact stories that the BHF have BHF-funded research has achieved in the last 60 years. And what we have is, on our website, we created other areas of the impact of BHF research. If you're really interested in seeing the variety of research that the BHF has supported over the last 60 years and the impact that has had, please, I'll get colleagues to put the link in the chat line. But if you're interested in that, please do visit this, because it'll show you what the BHF is here for. We're here for patients and the public. And we really rely on your support to do the work that Magdi and other colleagues have done over the years and will continue to do. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Magdi and Mary, for making it very special for us this evening. And I'm sure people will remember this live and ticking event for a long time. So thanks, everybody, and have a great evening, okay?